As indicated in the previous part of this lecture, beginning about 7000 BC, an agricultural tradition took root on the island of New Guinea. The challenge was to move that agriculture and population beyond New Guinea to the neighboring islands. And that navigational skill came from a different direction, the so-called Austronesians. This was a population that moved from the mainland of Asia in what is now China to the island of Taiwan probably 8,000 to 10,000 years ago. And then, beginning about 5,000 years ago, the Austronesians took to the sea and headed south, reaching first the Philippines and the islands of Indonesia, and then spreading both far to the west, as far as the island of Madagascar, as well as to the east, hitting first the island of New Guinea. In New Guinea, these two traditions, the navigational tradition of the Austronesians and the agricultural tradition of the New Guineans, or the Papuans, were joined. And in the second millennium BCE, that is to say, about 1,000 to 2,000 years before the Common Era, this tradition of agriculture and navigation began to move east. First to the Bismarck Archipelago, to the north and east of the island of New Guinea, where there was established a new culture called the Lapita culture, which is characterized by navigation, seagoing canoes, agriculture, those pigs, dogs, chickens, taro, yams, bananas, and sugar cane that we'd already seen in New Guinea, and the development of a characteristic pottery type pictured here. This Lapita culture or tradition then spread eastward across the Pacific, first to central Polynesia, the present islands of Fiji, Samoa, and Tonga, where the culture arrived at about 1000 BCE, and then in three directions: north to Hawaii, east as far as Easter Island, and finally south to New Zealand. The spread of this culture and the population that carried it was a remarkable achievement. But how did they do it? How did they move across the Pacific? During the first half of the 20th century, it was widely believed that the spread of these people must have been accidental. Wind-blown shipwrecks and other coincidental events must have carried them hundreds or even thousands of miles from one island to the next. It was assumed that they couldn't possibly have gone there intentionally or by their own skills. But that view has been revised. First, on logical grounds, because they obviously carried with them large populations of men and women, as well as plants, animals, and stone tools that would have hardly been taken to sea for fishing or other activities. They must have been going in search of land. And secondly, because the main direction of their expansion was eastward, which, as we saw in the lecture on the atmosphere, would have taken them directly into the teeth of the trade winds. In other words, if they had been blown accidentally, those winds would have taken them west, back from the direction from which they came, not east to new lands. Our knowledge of how they achieved this remarkable navigational success has been informed in the late 20th century by, in particular, this gentleman, Mau Piailug, a Micronesian who learned from his father the skills of traditional navigation and passed away in 2010. But before dying, Mau Piailug demonstrated by remarkable voyages, such as those from Hawaii to Tahiti and back, a distance of 2,600 miles each way, without use of any modern navigational device. Moreover, Piailug explained how he did it and how traditional Micronesian and Polynesian navigators would have sailed. They did so by studying the sky, the location of the sun and the stars, of clouds, which they knew to form over high elevations, such as those formed by volcanic peaks, even though they might be over the horizon, by the identity and movement of seagoing birds that were flying from one land place to another, fish that would be associated with the shallow waters around Pacific islands, the color of the sea, and very interestingly, the shape of waves, which they knew to take on certain forms after passing over islands. Observing all of these natural phenomena, these early navigators predicted where the next landfall was located and would seek it out for discovery and eventual settlement.